It turned out that Joan wanted a quick divorce, with the trust situation dealt with separately. She would not contest the grounds of infidelity, as they believed that if they went that route, the time for the divorce to be granted would be shortened since she was already remarried. I told them to proceed, and Barbara said I was making the right move. She mentioned she was done measuring, and that we needed to discuss material options and pricing. Why? I asked. Because this town is growing, and it won't be long before other homes are built that may allow them a direct view into yours. Also, finishing off the house will add value. For the next 4 hours we discussed each room and ordered the items online. After spending a considerable amount, I asked her if she expected me to hang them when they arrived, and she said yes, that's a man's job, but she would help. She figured she better check in with Judy, and we were glad she did. Judy had inside knowledge about what they found in the coffin. Wrapped and taped in bubble wrap for protection was a sealed envelope. Once it was open, it contained a note saying, "Next time, James and Joan, when you try to harm someone, make sure the person you hired is competent." It was signed by me. When I heard that, I couldn't help but laugh. When Barbara got off the phone, she asked for an explanation, so I told her that before I left to report, the judge had me sign a bunch of blank pages as if I was signing a letter. What they found must have been one of those. Barbara was just about to start dinner when I got a call letting me know all my friends and their spouses were on their way to welcome her to the neighborhood. I told her not to bother starting anything because we were about to have a house full. They wanted to welcome Barbara to our village and group. Apparently, Connie had spread the word that I had brought a classy lady back with me, and my daughters had approved. All the ladies wanted to meet the woman who had caught my attention. They joked all night that they had to see it to believe it. Charlie had finally found a girlfriend. Within 10 minutes the group arrived, and I proudly introduced Barbara to everyone. We were having a potluck dinner, country-style fried chicken, baked beans, nachos and cheese, potato chips, fries, coleslaw, fresh buns, 2 cases of beer and pecan pie. All the ladies loved Barbara's selection of dishes. After introductions, she quickly fit in, discussing the curtains, blinds and rods she had ordered, saying they should arrive on Friday. It was decided that Saturday afternoon we would all get together to put them up, but she insisted they bring nothing because she would prepare a meal for us all. Early Thursday morning, we went to a superstore in Port. Barbara wanted a large propane barbecue, a deep fryer and a smoker with the necessary tanks. We ended up buying a patio set that would seat 8 with 8 extra chairs and arranged for delivery the next day. I bought pre-cut lumber to build a couple of tables. Friday morning I started building her an outdoor cedar table that, when collapsed, would stand against the back wall but would be used as the main counter for serving food when pulled out. I stained it to match the wood of our log home, and protected it in the same way. She loved it. Thank goodness Ace Hardware pre-assembled it. It saved a lot of time. Saturday at noon they brought their ladders, and the 5 of us guys soon had the curtains set up in all the rooms. We let the ladies hang them. I had to admit in front of them all that Barbara had a great sense of design and style which made her smile. What we had done made the house look that much better and I acknowledged it. I laughed because Barbara blushed. Bill pointed out that I was going to need a garage and a storage room for the patio items before the winter weather set in. I had to agree, but if I was going to do it right, I wanted a protected pathway with a mudroom for coats and boots all made with logs. Barbara said we needed room for 2 freezers. I groaned and Connie caught it, saying, "Are you already planning for more kids?" I blushed and everyone laughed. Poor Charlie, he's already henpecked and doesn't know it. Connie joked and everyone roared again. Barbara had smoked and slow-cooked 20 pounds of ribs, made a huge potato salad, and prepared a quick shredded pickled cabbage relish and a regular salad. It was a hit with everyone, so all the ladies had to find out how the cabbage was made. To reward her for all her hard work, I made her breakfast on Sunday. Then, with friends, we took a cruise up the coast. Seeing her enjoyment in what we were doing, I made a note to take her to Seattle for some whale watching and to spend a day at the market. When Judy called Barbara, she privately admitted that she was in love. I felt the same, but I wouldn't make a move. I was too old and saw myself as too set in my ways. It had been an interesting week. We had over 3 evenings designed and laid out the plans, and my 4 best friends enjoyed teasing me about being in love. No matter how hard I argued, they knew I was in a challenging position. The rock removal company would be coming next week to start leveling the additional space. By the time they were finished, we would have county approval for a 4-bay garage, a built-in storage area in the back with an in-law apartment on top, and a 16-foot walkway leading to the large mudroom. James and Joan had been called into the FBI. Rumors suggested it wasn't going well. The investigation had narrowed down to 2 possible suspects who may have been hired to carry out the plan against me. It was difficult for them because of the lack of concrete evidence, and both were under scrutiny. On Friday, I received an interesting phone call from the president of the company I had founded. He wanted to know, as a major shareholder, if I would be interested in becoming the new CEO. I asked if I could have a week to think about it, and he agreed. Somehow the news leaked out, causing the shares to rally, rising to $139. Then, late Saturday, a very loud thunderstorm rolled in. I didn't realize it, but it would change our relationship forever. The storm hit in the middle of the night while I was lying in bed, listening to the heavy rain on the metal roof. Suddenly, my bedroom door opened just as a huge flash of lightning illuminated the room. Barbara walked in wearing a slim, almost sheer nightgown that barely covered her. She was a sight to behold, her silhouette framed by the lightning. I pretended to be asleep as she pulled the sheets back and crawled in beside me. Her body trembled in fright with the next thunderclap echoing off the walls. She pressed tightly against me. I could smell the sweet scent of fresh soap from her shower, with hints of lavender filling the air. The closeness was overwhelming. Turning sideways, she slid her leg over mine, wrapped her arm around my chest, and laid her head on my shoulder. I hadn't been this close to a woman in years, and I was a nervous wreck. As she raised her head to kiss my cheek, I turned toward her and our lips met. A gentle kiss turned into a slow, lingering exchange, fueled by our emotions. It became a night of wonders and whispers, as we made up for lost time. It wasn't just a physical connection, we were truly making love. In the afterglow, we admitted our feelings for each other. It was almost 10 a.m. when Hunter finally compelled us to get out of bed. I went down to brew some coffee, dressed only in my pajama bottoms. While waiting for it to brew, I called my daughter, Judy. "Dad!" Judy exclaimed, surprised. "It's good to hear your voice. I have to ask you something. What did Barb say to you during Jin's wedding?" I replied that the moment she saw you in the wedding party, it was love at first sight. The more she learned about you that night, the more she felt her feelings were real. She watched you all night, and ever since your return home she's been on cloud 9. "Whatever you plan to do, don't hurt her," Judy said, concerned. I chuckled and said, "Just between us. She slept in my bed last night, and this morning we admitted we're in love." Judy got emotional, so I told her I would let her go and talk to her later. The coffee was almost ready, so I cleaned the French press and warmed our cups. Just as I finished, the doorbell rang. It was FedEx with a special delivery for my lawyer, my divorce certificate. The court had waived the waiting period due to extenuating circumstances. I was officially free. Barbara was coming downstairs, her face glowing with happiness. Her cell phone rang and she answered. Within seconds she burst out laughing. After a moment she ended the call. "That was Judy," she said. "She had a question for you." "Oh, and what was that?" I asked. "She asked if it was okay if she started calling me Mom," Barbara replied, giving me another kiss. "You just had to tell her, didn't you?" I laughed. Barbara said I had to make the first move because you never would. She was right. I had seen myself as too old to fall in love again. I poured us both our morning coffee and walked over to the kitchen table. After mixing mine the way I liked it, I grabbed Barbara's cup as she headed toward me. When she saw the letter from my lawyer, she picked it up and read it. The second page was the certificate. She looked at me, tears of joy in her eyes. I got up and held her in my arms. "Is it time for you to meet my parents?" she asked. When I said yes, she called her mother to ask if they still did family gatherings on the family farm during Labor Day weekend. When she said yes, she told her that she would be coming home for it, and her mother was thrilled. Instead of having it on Monday, she explained that they would be gathering on Saturday because others had plans for that Monday. Judy and Joanne were both out before the end of summer, and we spent one day going through their binders. Both daughters and Barb were surprised by how much I had documented about their lives. We flew into Kyoga County Airport, where we had a rental car waiting. After settling our luggage, we booked ourselves into a Holiday Inn. It was a beautiful September day, and the plane was scheduled to pick us up the following Tuesday. Barb hadn't been home in 2 years, but she warned me that both her father and 2 brothers had served in the military, and since I was the first man in her adult life she was bringing home, I would surely be put to the test to see if I was good enough for their only daughter. The next morning she drove us to the farm. We arrived early, and I figured this because we were the 3rd vehicle in the yard. Her mother rushed out of the house to greet us before we even turned off the car, clearly shocked that her only daughter was with a man. Hearing the commotion, her father came out to see what the fuss was about, and I was taken aback to find out that her father was Bullfrog Patterson, my old drill sergeant. The first words out of his mouth were, "Well, I thought like all the new recruits that he was just a troublemaker." "Barb, what are you doing with this guy?" He laughed, holding his hand out to me. "He cost me over $1,000. I was supposed to break him and get him to drop out, but instead he excelled despite me. He became one of the best Marines I've ever trained." I couldn't help but smile. "Bullfrog," I said as Barb and her mom looked at me in surprise. I wanted to have a serious talk with Barb or his father because I wanted to ask for his daughter's hand. I had no clue he would react that way. "Are you serious?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Yes, ma'am," I replied firmly, noticing Bullfrog's smile grow wider. "You've got it." "John is my only reply," he said. "My only daughter couldn't come home with a better man." With that, I got down on one knee, pulled the ring box out of my pocket in front of her parents, and asked Barb to marry me. Completely surprised, she said yes. I stood up and slid the ring on, praying it would fit. It did. Then I gave her a big kiss. After a round of congratulations and warm welcomes from her parents, her mom said, "Let me grab the keys to the truck and we'll do a quick run for beer. It'll give us a chance to talk." Barb's mom was emotional for 2 reasons. Her daughter had come home with a man her father approved of, and had gotten engaged right on the spot. Our first stop was the local Legion for a draft. Bullfrog asked if I had finalized my divorce, and I confirmed that I had. I explained how I had met his daughter and how our relationship developed. He knew I came from a good background, so he didn't need to pry. He introduced me to everyone proudly as his future son-in-law. Someone asked how he got the nickname Bullfrog. I explained he was our drill sergeant for basic training, and it was his job to weed us out. Since I joined at the age of 16 with my parents' approval, he felt I really didn't want to be there. He came down on me hard. Every little mistake meant extra punishment. One night in the barracks, one of the guys said, "Man, you're really in for it. What do you think of him?" I replied, "He reminds me of a bullfrog sitting on a log trying to catch bugs. The problem is, in his eyes, I'm the bug." The guys loved it and it stuck. We spent a couple of hundred picking up beer and rye. I knew Bullfrog would make sure I was so intoxicated by the end of the day that I wouldn't be able to drive. By the time we got back, the yard was full of cars. We took some of the beer and rye to the house, then drove Bullfrog's truck around to park it for easy access. As we arrived, Barb and her mom greeted us. Just then, a voice in the crowd yelled, "Son of a hard hat, Charlie, is that you?" I looked up to see measly Mike. "Old dog, how in the hell are you? It's good to see you, brother." Within seconds, we were giving each other a big brotherly hug, knowing we were still good friends. Bullfrog looked at us and said, "You know each other?" "He's the best tech I ever had working under me," I replied with a big grin. Bullfrog asked, "Why did he call you Hard Hat Charlie?" "When I re-enlisted, I started using my second name and made it to Major before I was discharged," I explained. "I got that name from my SEAL team during what would end up being my last mission." "So you're the Charlie who saved my son's life," Bullfrog said. We both nodded in agreement. Barb walked up, stood beside me and whistled to get everyone's attention. She introduced me to everyone as her boyfriend, and then said, "My mother has something to say before we continue with the party." Turning to me, she whispered, "I'm keeping the keys because if I know my dad and brother, you're going to be too intoxicated to drive." Barb's mom, Gloria, spoke up. "I wish to officially announce the engagement of my only daughter Barbara, to retired Major Jonathan Charles Barnes. She came home because Jonathan wanted our approval before he asked our daughter. My husband trained him and said he was one of the best he ever had. It took him no more than 20 seconds to give his blessing. As soon as he got it, he got down and proposed right in front of us. Everybody seemed stunned, but Mike said, "You're going to be my brother-in-law," repeating it as if he was trying to convince himself it was true. For the next hour, Barb introduced me to her extended family. She admitted it had been a long time since she had seen her family look so proud. And she was right. They definitely got me drunk. I had no idea how we made it back to the hotel. I couldn't remember half the night. I had to ask my future wife if I had made a fool of myself. She summed it up by saying, "You outlasted the other two guys." As I struggled to get out of bed, I felt rough. Barb said it served me right, and I swore to myself it would be the last time. During breakfast, Barb whimsically took a picture of her ring with her cell phone and texted Judy, sending her the photo as an attachment. She texted, "You can call me Mom if you agree to be my maid of honor." Less than 10 minutes later, we were on a conference call with my 3 very excited daughters. They were all thrilled. We learned that James and Joan were dealing with the FBI on multiple levels and facing various possible charges. Their defense bills were climbing, and both of their careers were in jeopardy. James had DNA tests done on his 3 sons and found that they were all his. I guess all he was going through had created doubts in his own mind. It looked like their marriage was strained to its limit, and my 3 daughters felt it would be lucky to last another year. The money that funded it all had been traced back to James, who had it paid for through the trust given legal authority to him after my fake death by Joan. It proved that their plans had started long before I caught them. Little did we know that in his warped mind everything happening to him was my fault, and he still claimed he was being framed. Most thought he had lost all credibility. My trust, which had still not been settled, was now worth millions, and the lawyers would be fighting over it for months. I told them the court had put it into the hands of a trustee until the settlement came. The only problem we faced right now was that my 3 daughters wanted us to fly to New York for a family celebration. We agreed to come as soon as Barb's work schedule allowed it. All the girls were pushing for a date. I worked it out with the board with my future bride's approval to accept the position of CEO. Meetings would be held on the 2nd and 4th Friday of each month, with secure conference calls 3 days a week. I wanted to limit my time away from Barb. She had become my world. Barb started her first day at the hospital and soon fit right in. Working in the ER in a small town allowed a lot of free time, so she began taking courses to further her career. She worked 4 12-hour days one week and 3 the next. Her hours were from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., so I made sure to meals ready by the time she came home. Our friends got a kick out of how domesticated I was becoming. It made me wonder if they had ever had a clue about a bachelor's life. After her first 3 weeks, we flew out that Thursday night to New York so I could attend a press conference the following morning to announce my new position on the board. It was after that media event that I learned the court had ruled that all the changes made to my trust after the report of my false death were made illegally. The court ruled that I would have to pay James and Joan 19% of its current value, and if they wanted any of the personal property, they would have to buy it back at market value if I agreed to sell it. It was a huge blow for them. I instructed my lawyers to work out the details of the split, providing they got to keep their family home. After the conference, Barb and I went back to my parents' house, where we learned my 3 daughters and Stephen would be joining us on Saturday. Mom and Dad wanted to give their own version of a welcome to the family. Although she had the staff, Barb cooked the meals. We had one big problem to solve, where we would get married and how we could satisfy our friends and family. By the end of the day, with my parents' help, we decided to get married in Ohio and have a second reception back here with family and their friends, along with a gathering with the crew back home. After everything was settled, I would ask Barb's brother, Measly Mike, to be my best man. Judy was Barb's maid of honor and Jean and Joe would be the ladies-in-waiting. Stephen and her other brother would round out the wedding party. We set the date for the last Saturday in December because it had always been Barb's wish to be a December bride. We had just finished a delicious family dinner made by my mom when there was a knock at the front door. When my dad returned from answering it, we were surprised to find my former wife asking to talk to me. My gut told me no way, and so did my parents. Barb said, "You must forgive her before you can be free from the past. Connie told me about her actions and how your wisdom won them both over. It's time you applied your own wisdom to yourself. I went to Dad's office for a few moments before calling Joan. Joan, I said, before we begin, I want you to hear the last words I heard from you years ago. I was sitting in the judge's office when he spoke to you. Pay attention to the tone of your voice and what you said back then. Just so you know, I just emailed a statement to CNN confirming that I was there when the judge recorded it, and I listened to the conversation via speakers while you two were talking. Joan's face went pale. She now understood that I knew the whole truth. The mass media had never played the entire conversation. I excused myself to get a strong drink so she could have the privacy to hear her own words as I remembered them that fateful day. I returned with a scotch and water, listening outside the door until the conversation between the judge and her was finished before going back into Dad's office. Imagine if you can imagine that conversation from my side as I listened to you deliberately write me out of my daughter's lives. Try to see it from my perspective, the cheating, the hurt, the pain, and the tears. Consider the price we all had to pay because you became my older brother's high-class partner. I have asked many times what James did during the 3 years he lived with us besides betraying me behind my back. What was it you famously told our daughter that the story about their dad's death was sad but true? We can be thankful because it brought Uncle James to all of you. I said this coldly with a firm voice. Did you ever say anything in our relationship that was 100% true? Jennifer, Judy, and Joe have all heard the same thing. They have even seen the date it was recorded and know it was before my reported death. The result is that they are now questioning everything James and you ever said to them. Listening to that tape has forever destroyed any trust they had in both of you. I told her time appears to have proven that I was nothing more to James and you than a tool for you to use for your own ends. When Jennifer found me, I knew I could not be the walking dead anymore. It was time for me to reclaim my name, my family, and my life. The family secrets had to end. I stated this firmly. Joan looked shell-shocked. My words had struck her like arrows of steel. Tears were now flowing like a gentle spring rain. I had to wonder if it was caused by remorse or the shame of being caught. I got up from behind my dad's desk, handing her a box of tissues. Taking my drink in my hand, I left, saying I would give her time to gather her thoughts. Barb and my parents were in the living room when I walked in. My mom was showing Barb all the photos she had collected over the years. By the looks on her faces, I can guess it's not going well, my father said. Well, she heard her own words to the judge in his response. Before I gave her a chance to speak, I told her to imagine how I must have felt, considering I was listening to the conversation on his speakerphone at the time. I asked her a few questions and she lost it, so I'm giving her time to collect her thoughts before we talk. I told her that her daughters had heard it all too, and saw that the conversation had taken place days before my reported death. I pointed out that her own words had destroyed any trust her daughters had in both of them. I came out because I did not want to watch her tears. Are you okay? Barb asked me with genuine concern. Just stating the facts, I said. It has given me an inner peace I have not felt in a long time. The rage, the anger I once had is gone. I can now accept whatever comes. It looked like Barb was right. Then, after refilling my drink, I walked back into the office and sat down, lighting a cigarette while I waited for her to begin. We saw you catching us as the brass ring. Finally, we would get what we had always dreamed, the chance to live our lives beyond closed doors. When the judge called, James was in the kitchen with me. We both saw him interfering in what was not his business. His anger and rage drove my thoughts and my response. I really hadn't given my comments much thought, Joan said softly. You know the judge was right. Your father had been texted the video I took before the judge called him. Your father asked us to do nothing until he got there. Within the hour he was in his plane flying down. When he heard the conversation he himself went into shock. They both felt as I did that you had set everyone up. If it came out, their careers would be over and their reputations damaged beyond repair. When Jennifer heard it, she demanded we get our DNA tested to verify that what we believed was true. Thankfully, she was my biological daughter. Both would have reacted strongly if it had been different, I replied. Your comments made it clear that everything you two were doing was deliberate. Now you know why, to this day, your own father has had little to do with you. He told the whole family when he went home what had to be done and why. The question I have is, what gave you the right to write me out of our children's lives? I have to ask because our daughters want to know. I stood up because her tears were starting to flow again and walked out. What are your thoughts so far? Barb asked. She's trying to justify her actions, nothing more, nothing less. She has shown no remorse and hasn't apologized. I feel the only thing she is sorry for is the fact that it has all come out, I said. Just looking at the three of them told me all I needed to know. They were as shocked as I was. We were all trying to figure out why she had come. We were both looking at doing time. Jan said when I came back into the room. The FBI has us on charges of lying to them, at least tax evasion, faking a death, theft, and a couple more, all involving your trust. Our lawyers are trying to work out a plea deal as we speak before we're officially charged. James and I both feel if you spoke up they might not be as harsh. Sadly, to this point they have not asked me a word. Why would they? I was in the forces overseas fighting for our freedom while others play their games, I said with a smile on my face. I really can't help you, can I? You made your bed, you lie in it. This is James and your mess. I have often asked myself if you were ever really in love with me. I now know you weren't. I guess you'll finally learn the hard way that there are consequences for your actions that money can't buy you out of. You haven't changed. I had hoped for you to apologize for what you had done, but you didn't. You came to try to save your own skin. It's always been about you and what you wanted, so please allow me the pleasure of escorting you out. I guess you'll both end up claiming it's not your fault. I could not stop laughing as she left the house. Mom and Dad were being just that. Barb and I had to sleep in separate beds, which made me realize just how attached Barb and I had become. There's nothing like the warmth of a body next to you in the middle of the night from a loved one that can calm a troubled soul.